state allows him to be here. I would like to start with the reading of the appeal statement. Pursuant to the provision of Section 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, please take notice that decisions of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County Community Oversight Board may be appealed to the Chancery Court of Davidson County for review under a common law writ of cert. Any appeal must be filed within 60 days after entry of a final decision by the board. Any person or other entity considering an appeal should consult with an attorney to ensure that time and procedural requirements are met. Thank you. Next, we will have a reading, approval of the minutes. I would hope that the board has read through the minutes that were sent ahead of time. And I'll accept the motion to approve the minutes. Or if everyone wants a little bit of time, we can certainly have some time as well. I'm open to either. Mr. Cooper.
There is one minor change to be made in the minutes. There may be others, but at our meeting in May, we met not on the third floor boardroom here at the Lentz Public Health Center, but in the Centennial Room. So that needs to be changed to read Centennial Room.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Any additional revisions? No? Okay. Sounds like we all feel good about it.
Yep.
All right. I'll accept the motion.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Second. Thank you, Ms. Ross. Focused conversation. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or nay? Abstentions? Thank you. The motion passes. Next, we have the fines and fees technical assistance grant. I know that in the month of May, or last meeting rather, we had Mr. Floyd, another member of the mayor's office, come to with us before us to talk to us. From what I gather, we had an understanding agreement that Mr. Holloway would attend and represent the board at those meetings. And so, Mr. Holloway, with that, you certainly have the floor.
Basically, it's a committee that's designed to analyze Davidson County, Ramsey County, and Dallas County. And what they're trying to do, they're trying to analyze general session courts, criminal court clerk, and money, how the money is being spent. The collective fee, first they are fined, and then a certain amount of the fees are collected, and then there are some fees that are waived. And so they're trying to track down where the money is really going to, or how they can save money. So it's an ongoing process. So they'll be here in September for another meeting, and their finding will be in October. But basically, they're trying to figure out how we can save money. They looked at where people are being arrested, and they've been put on these bonds that so high they can't make it, so they got to stay in jail, and then they got to feed them, they got to apply housing for them, and so they have to see what can they do to lower these bonds. Depends on the charges, you just can't let anybody out of jail. Some of these non-violent crime, maybe so. You got people that has been in there waiting trial months at a time, and so, but that still costs the city money. But if there's a non-violent crime, then maybe they can release them, maybe they can go out and work and then contribute towards their fine. And I gave an example of a man that owed about $7,000, and he said he'll never be able to get his bill paid, and this special judge was hearing this case. And she asked him how much money he had in the pocket. He said $700. She said, how did you get here? He said, a friend of mine brought me. He said, well, you give me what you got in your pocket and keep $5, and you go get him to take you back home. But I'm going to dismiss this. I'm going to take the rest of the remainder of this money and close this out, and you can start your life off work and get your license back, because, you need to work, you need to get transportation stuff. And so some people it's just like a rolling ball, it's a revolving door. They go and drive, And so they trying to figure out how can we help these people, what kind of system can they do to get these people to pay their fines or lower the fee. But some people just not going to pay it regardless. And so they trying to work out how can we do this as far as the general session court, criminal court, they're not dealing with federal yet. But if they can set the fee or put them in a situation where they can manage these fees and stuff like that, then everybody can live a happy life. But they said it has worked in San Francisco, so they know it works. So we had one member on that committee was former chief of police Ron Cepaz, so the mayor has seen this, and so he would feel good that this would be something for us to how to manage our funds that going through the system so that we could save money and also manage what we do have, because you got to look at the fact that you got to pay personnel to handle the process of going through the computer system, doing the paperwork on it. So, if we can manage this and lower some of the standards, and believe that we can, everybody can be happy.
Mr. Holloway, is there anything that the board should be aware of how we should be aware of or about next steps or how we need to be engaged? Was there anything you need to bring back that we should vote on, about how we will be involved here?
No, it's nothing that we have to vote on, but what they did allow people from the community to sit in on the second day of this meeting and give their opinion about people they know and the process of going. I think one guy was in there, hadn't too long got out of jail, and he was telling about what he had to go through, and stuff like that. And so they're going to report back to us in September to let us know how the process is going and what we can do as the police department. The chief of police was there, Howard Gentry was there, the sheriff, Glenn Funk, anybody that has something to do with the fees and stuff like that will participate, and they're going to have to allow them to see what they are doing in their department.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
I think it's this board will come into play when the advice or the advisory report is made in October. Yeah, as far as just like the community rollout and how we can participate in making sure our local government stays the course of whatever they advise we do as far as reform.
Thank you. Any additional comments or questions for Mr. Holloway on this particular topic? Mr. Holloway, when's the next meeting?
They said September, but didn't give an exact date on it.
September.
But they will notify us. Okay,
great. And so I will hold on adding this to the agenda until the fall.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Holloway. I want to pause before I move to Mr. Campbell-Gooch and Dr. Lewis. I didn't put in what I usually include chair remarks, but just very quickly I want to say thank you and acknowledge Mr. Campbell-Gooch for standing in and convening and leading the meeting. I did, what else can you do on vacation but watch old COB meetings recording? So I did take the time to look at the meeting so that I was aware of what comes next, and Mr. Campbell-Gooch, you did wonderfully well, no surprise to anyone here, so congratulations. I know you were nervous, nothing to worry about at all. You're fantastic. I also just want to acknowledge that, and they'll have a formal introduction here, but we have our Community Oversight Board staff here with us, of course led by Mr. Whedon, and more to come on that too, but I want to say welcome. We're so happy to see your faces. I see you speckled about. They don't know who you are quite yet, but I do. I got a chance to meet you, but welcome to the space, and we certainly look forward to hearing from each one of you. And then last but not least, I want to just acknowledge to the exec committee here. I know we did not convene this month. I certainly didn't forget about it. I was waiting on a few bits of information, but I will send an email out to figure out when we can convene again. And so to be determined there. So my apologies if anyone had anything that they wanted to discuss before the meeting today. With that, I will continue to move forward here and ask Mr. Campbell-Gooch and Dr. Lewis if you have anything you want to add. I noticed from the recording, at least, that there was conversation about more detailed sharing, and sorry if I'm kind of paraphrasing here, of the meeting in New York. And if there's a report or anything you want to share maybe in the coming week, that's fine too. I just wanted to extend the time and space for the two of you. So.
Yeah, I mean, there was some conversation about reports, and I think Ms. Ross brought it up, reports being the best practices when someone goes and represents this board at any training. Everybody will get that report, but like I said before, the report will be kind of skinny. It'll be slim because we participated in the mastermind. It really wasn't a training. It was more about, and Dr. Lewis, you can fill in, it was more about our perspective.
It was a lot about networking and perspectives and just sort of engaging with other people who have been through this process.
Yeah, very similar to kind of like how NACO was.
Okay, understand. So with that in mind, look, I know we won't convene again until the last Wednesday, of course, of July. Could we plan to have that report perhaps by at least the second week of July?
Yep.
So the board has ample time to review, and then if there are any follow-up questions or comments, please feel free to send them in to me and or to Mr. Whedon. In that way, when we come together to create the agenda, we can do it accordingly. Does that work for everyone? Ms. Hildred.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your service. I look forward to report. And one of the things that I think I would find useful, and maybe some others would as well, is if you could indicate who, not necessarily the individuals, but what other entities or programs were represented, if they have a presence on a website, a hot link to that, and any documents, sort of going on with our continuing theme of creating a space for civic education and making sure that everybody, those in the room and those who follow along on the video, have an opportunity to examine primary sources to the best of their ability. So anything that links to that would be really useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hildred. Mr. Campbell.
And if I can add to what Dr. Hildreth has just brought in, the whole purpose of it was to create a standard document for all the entities present to refer to. And that document hasn't been produced, and they didn't really have a timeline on when it would be. They said towards the end of the year, so I'm pretty sure as soon as we get that, like you said, in a sense of transparency, we'll share that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments or thoughts on this? Okay. If not, I'd like to extend the floor to Mr. Whedon. I know that there are several updates and also information ahead of us that we'd like to share. Extend it to Mr. Whedon.
Thank you, Chair Dave. Well, the first bit of information I want to share is good news, of course, that we have added 6 new members to the staff, and they are present here today. Of course, you already met Ms. Jill Fitchard, our Assistant Director, she's seated in the middle there. We have Ms. Paula Person in the purple here. She's keeping our minutes today. Thank you. And she's the Executive Assistant. Paula comes to us from the Historical Commission. And of course, as you know, Ms. Fitchard came to us from the Public Defender's Office. In addition, right here to my left, we have Mr. Todd Pinkley, who is our legal advisor. And Todd comes to us from TennCare, where he was an administrative law judge, right? And holding up the rear here, we have our investigative staff.
Can't see him.
Can't see him? We don't have to stand up there.
There we go.
All right, we have, that's Mr. Vernon Johnson there. He is one of our investigators. He comes to us from Belmont University. In the middle there, we have April Williams. She comes to us from the Department of Children's Services. And there at the end, we have Mr. Henry Ramirez, who comes to us as a retiree from Santa Monica Police Department. Yes. All right. That's our investigation.
I like the class.
And we're very welcome to have them on board. In addition, have more good news to share. The investigative staff and everyone else joined us on the 17th of June Also, on the 17th of June, I'm finally happy to report that we moved into our new facility, same building, but temporary facility in the same building at 222 2nd Avenue North, the Washington Square building. We have 2 separate offices in that building. There wasn't an office big enough to accommodate 10 people, so we have 2 offices that accommodate 5 people each. The permanent facility will also be in that building, but we're there. We had a couple of snafus upon arriving at the facility. Number one, our IT equipment was not installed yet. The IT network was delayed, mainly because we were delayed in securing an address where they would lay the network down. So once we finally got the network scheduled and the address, it delayed us by a couple of weeks. So it looks like we won't have the IT network down until after the 4th of July holiday, which means at the current time we have no desk phones or telephones for the office, and we also have no fax machines or copiers that run off the IT network as well. As a workaround for that, IT did provide us with net mobility. We have a hotspot on both floors at the building for both offices, so we're able to get on the Metro network. IT also provided us with laptops for everyone. Everyone has laptops, and we have hotspot connectivity. In addition, we will be provided with cell phones for each member of the staff. We haven't received those yet. They should be in tomorrow, I believe. So we will be connected mobily to the outside world. In addition, we have received our permanent phone numbers for the office and staff. We have a permanent office number and a permanent complaint line number. I don't want to share that right now because the lines aren't up and connected, so I don't want anyone to call those numbers because any complaint or anything of that sort will get lost. But we have that, and as soon as we're connected, we will post that information on our webpage for the public so that if any issues come up or if anyone wants to address the COB staff, they can do that. Lastly, well, not lastly, but other items I need to report are we have several internal projects that have been waiting in the wings for our new staff, and we are looking forward to moving on these projects as soon as possible, one of which is the mediation program that we're looking forward to implementing at some point in time, rather sooner than later. Our legal advisor is working on that as we speak. He's been working diligently, looking at some programs from around the country, trying to find out what fits best for us here in Nashville. We're looking at also an internship program. We hope to have that up and running by the fall and partner with several of the universities here in Nashville to get some students and have the students gain some valuable life experience with a civilian oversight agency and also hopefully some credit. And at the same time, we receive a little help in the office in doing various projects. Another thing we're looking at also, in addition to that, we hope to get going with we like to be able to partner up with some of the community organizations and agencies here in town to have them be sort of a remote receiving location for complaints of any sort of police misconduct that may occur or complaints that people may have. Organizations like the Urban League or NAACP, hopefully we can partner with them and train some of their staff about how to intake any sort of complaints that they might receive and forward those on to us. In addition, I would like to be able to have our staff go to various locations throughout the city and some of these community organizations and work remotely from those locations on a continuous basis just to build a relationship in various areas of town. I think that would be conducive to building a good relationship with the community. We also hope to, well, our website. We're going to have a website that will be external from your website, the COB board members' website. There will also be a COB staff members' website or staff website. We hope to get that up and running in the next couple of weeks. We need to submit some the content for that website to IT, and IT can get that up and running for us rather quickly, and we look forward to doing that as well. And other than that, I think the last topic I want to report on is training. You should have in front of you something, that document there with the yellow highlights. A couple of weeks ago, Assistant Director Richard and I met with Deputy Chief Huggins of the Metropolitan Police Department, along with Captain Stevens, and we discussed developing training programs for the COB staff in addition to the COB board members. The document that you have in front of you is actually the outline for the Citizen Police Academy that was developed by Chief Huggins and Captain Stevens. It's an enhanced Citizens Police Academy, a little bit more enhanced than the typical Citizens Police Academy. They added a few extra classes there in yellow that would be more beneficial to the Community Oversight Board. As you can see, there's no dates listed on that outline, just week numbers, week number 1, week number 2. The program is going to last about 14 weeks, I think. It'll be 1 day a week. It's 1 day a week, 14 weeks, and we haven't settled on a date yet, but once we settle on a date, we fill that date in, and we'll continue for 14 days, once a week after that, to complete the Citizens Police Academy for both the staff and the board members. In addition, Chief Huggins and Captain Stevens and myself and Ms. Fitcher discussed providing other training for the COB staff. That training consists of several classes that are currently being offered to Metro Police Department recruits in regards to substantive issues and the law and procedural issues, police procedural issues, and also in-service training that is currently offered to Metro Police officers as well. I submitted a list to Captain Stevens and Chief Huggins last month. It consisted of about 800 hours of classes. They have to whittle that down to something a little bit more manageable, something that will be about 3 or 4 weeks worth of training. They're trying to do that right now, seeing who's available amongst their training staff to put on those training classes. And hopefully we'll get that down and hammered out in the next couple of weeks, and our investigators can then attend that training and get up to speed on Metro policies and procedures for the police department here. I think last time I talked to you about the FBI Citizens Academy, which we hope to be involved with. We missed it. It was offered here in Nashville this past March. It's offered once a year. It'll be offered again in March of 2020. We hope to participate in that. I've had contact with Sheila Mosby over at the FBI, and she put me in touch with also another FBI agent that's in charge of training, and we hope to get in touch with that agent, and he can offer us training on color of law, federal issues dealing with color of law violations, misconduct violations, things of that sort. And hopefully that could happen also within the next month or so. Finally, we have in front of you, I've submitted a copy of the NACO training. This is the NACO National Conference that's coming up in September. It is a 4-day conference that I believe is very valuable to members of our staff. And in fact, I wanted to send all of the members of our staff to this conference. I think it would be beneficial to them to learn the practical skills necessary to be a proficient civilian oversight investigator, and also they can learn the skills to become a certified practitioner of oversight which is a title offered by the NACO organization. If they attend, they have to attend at least 2 national trainings, national training classes or the conferences within a 3-year period, and also obtain 45 hours worth of training to receive that title. This NACO conference, as you can see, it's 4 days. They have 3 different tracks with several classes, very important classes. The tracks are dealing with, one track is training, second track deals with developing community trust, and the third track deals with institutional culture. And there's some very relevant classes to our staff, such as policy recommendations, role of civilian oversight, long-term reform. That'll be relevant to our research analysts, of course, and data-driven policy. That's also relevant to our future data analysts. We have body-worn cameras. That's one of the topics under the training track. And just several other various courses and classes that would go a long way to educating the staff. So hopefully we can get involved in this. I did a quick analysis of how much it might cost us to send the entire staff, and it might sound like quite a bit of money, but it's actually not. It comes down to about $19,000, $19,300, round that off. Most of that, of course, consists of the air transportation, which is about $2,500. Early bird registration right now for the NACO conference for all of our members, if we can get in with the early bird registration, would be $4,764, so about $4,800 for registration. If we can get the early bird registration, I think that saves us about $150 per person if we register early. The airfare, of course, fluctuates, but when I did this estimate about 2 weeks ago, the airfare round trip to Detroit was only about $225. Of course, that fluctuates as closer you get to the departure date, the airfare goes up. The per diem was for food and expenses per day came to about $3,000. So in essence, the total budget for this NACO conference was about $19,300. And that is in line with what we had on in our budget for the fiscal year. In fact, that was the majority of what I planned for in our training expenses. I think one of the line items we have here is employee out-of-town travel. That's $20,000. That line item 502451. So I think we've already taken into account that this training would be necessary and that it would be rather expensive, but it was already budgeted for, I think, in our fiscal budget. So I think we have enough to cover that. I don't think it would be a problem, and I think the benefit received from us attending the class would be much greater than the output of expenditure. So I would highly recommend that the board consider approving that expenditure. But we can talk more about that later. Another expenditure that I wanted to get involved with right away was a program offered by Dr. Ruben Cockrell, who is actually present here today. Dr. Ruben Cockrell is seated here in the front row. There's Dr. Cockrell. Dr. Cockrell is he's a management consultant. One of his skills is a management consultant, and he's put together a program for us to, as an organization, learn better management and organizational skills, best practices, and how to build a better team and operate more efficiently and effectively and as a team, and build strategies towards accomplishing our goal of having the best community oversight organization in the nation. And definitely we want to try to take advantage of that if we can. As you can see in Dr. Cockrell's outline, he offers several topics dealing with best practices on how to improve the workplace, performing tasks, building relationships amongst colleagues, and also building relationships amongst outside influences and stakeholders. He can speak more about what in all his program entails, but I believe that to have a better direction on how we want the office to focus on the task at hand would be a great benefit to us. And we've also have one of our line items in our budget is earmarked for management consulting, and I think that this, the cost of this, which is $5,000, would be within the budget amount. So that is something I also hope that the board would consider approving for the organization at this time. And with that, I think that would be the end of items that I have to mention about the updates for the board and staff. So.
Thank you, Mr. Whedon. We have both of these expenditure requests listed next in the agenda. I want to hold on questions about that. Are there any comments or questions related to any of the other topics that Mr. Whedon discussed with us? As far as the updates, I can only imagine the woes of last week with moving in and also welcoming a fully stocked team. So I'm glad to see everyone is here and that they came back after day one. So that's wonderful to hear. I do want to thank you for your thoroughness and the documents you sent us ahead of time. They're very helpful. I believe Mr. Campbell Gooch also has comments here.
Yes, just real quick. You talked about that there were no dates as far as when the training takes place. Do you know when we can expect to receive the information about the dates?
You know, if you look at the proposed training program, it's the staff members will be able to go to that training because they'll adjust their schedules. Some of those classes are held in the PM, 6 to 9, things of that sort. Now, the board is also required to go to the Community Police Academy. So I think what would probably be best is for the board members to get together and figure out what might work best for you, because we're a little bit more flexible. Our staff will go as part of their employment duties. Of course, you as board members are volunteers and you have other obligations. But we're going to have to do this at some point in time. I think we may just have to pull the trigger on it if we can't come to a consensus about when we want to start. But we're ready to go with the police academy. We just need to select a date.
So, Mr. Whedon, I think the best way to, let's just be as efficient as possible, the best way to determine next steps on the date, I mean, we know that we're ready to move forward. At least what's been successful for the board is when we use the doodle poll and we've sent it out and just send it out to each one of the board members. So really just selecting, let's say you select the start date of maybe Saturday, I'm saying July X, whatever it is. Just send it out that way, or maybe it's Saturdays, or trying to figure out if it's Thursdays. I don't know exactly what you might want to share for it, but if you could determine that and maybe even send me I'm happy to work with you or perhaps with members of the staff as well. I think that's proven to be the best way for us to land on the most comfortable date for the group. Does that work for the board here, Mr. Holloway?
That would, well, we need to have an idea of what would work best for us, and then go to the academy and let them see.
That's what we're planning to do, yes, sir.
And they will let us know if that's convenient for them.
Exactly. That's exactly the plan. Exactly. Mr. Campbell.
And so we would need, just so I'm clear, so we would need 6 dates? So the doodle poll would be for 6 of these?
Yeah, it sounds as if it would be, and so I know it's by week here, but we would be picking, Mr. Whedon, I'm kind of looking for confirmation, that we would be picking one day each week, like that standard day. So if it's Tuesday evenings or Tuesdays, or would it be fluctuating? I think that's Mr. Campbell's question.
I don't know. I think it's probably going to be best for the police to have firm dates for all 14 days because they have a teaching staff that needs to be present and make their schedule a little bit, a firm schedule. So we probably need to figure out
14.
each of those 14 days.
So you're, okay, so that's gonna be, that's like,
Yeah.
I don't know that math, that's almost like an infinite, it's like infinity, right? And with 11 people consider.
I mean, we could say each of those days could be a Saturday. Well, I guess it could maybe be every day could be a Saturday if you want to. You
So-
probably don't want to. You don't want to.
I like y'all, I don't wanna give you 14 Saturdays.
Objections to Saturday night. So,
Mr. Whedon, I believe, if you are okay with Ms.
From what I recall, the meeting with the chief and the training director, they wanted to have one night a week and maybe one Saturday at the end for the graduation.
Okay,
And
so,
so they wanted us to pick a firm date, and then we would move on to a Saturday for the graduation day.
it makes sense, so one weeknight
One
that
weeknight,
works,
yes.
and then from there, one Saturday perhaps in that same month or towards the end,
Within 14 weeks.
within 14 weeks that
Yes.
works,
He said
okay.
Citizens Academy is usually 12 weeks, but there were some other topics that he wanted to include, and so they stretched it to 14 weeks.
14 weeks, gotcha.
Understand.
And the highlighted portion, Mr. Whedon, is the portion that's been recommended that the board participate in. Not all, and that's why I'm trying to be clear here too, it's not all 14 weeks, it's just the highlighted section, right? Or no?
So,
Jim,
And why is the
I
portion
believe
highlighted?
the yellow highlighted sections were the classes that they added. Is that correct?
The 14 those are classes that they were trying to establish. Those were added into the training academy. They were trying to establish if those were the classes that we really needed.
Added in, okay.
And those, of course, are the times. So it would run from 1,800 hours.
I don't know.
Perfect, okay.
1,800
But
hours.
they do want us to come to all 14.
That's
right?
correct.
Oh,
Just
okay.
making sure we were all clear.
Very important, okay. Thank you, Dr. Hilton.
While we're on logistics, just doing the math, even if we started immediately, we're almost going to get into the fall academic calendar.
That's what my concern
And I am betting that there are more than one persons on this commission who actually have teaching duties. I know that I will not be able to do Thursdays. That will be non-negotiable because there's already contractual. And so even if we're not doing a full doodle poll, getting some hard no's from us may be helpful so we can figure out how to work around that.
Right, thank you. Mr. Whedon, if possible, let's find time, we can talk offline, I can talk with you and members of the staff, and let's, come up with dates that we'd like to put before the board and share it out sooner rather than later. And then we can figure out where we stand. Hopefully there's a magical, evening that can work for at least the majority of us. It's what we hope. Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
Oh, I had something. I have another follow-up question if that
sure.
topic is closed. You mentioned intake from community organizations. My question is, do those community organizations have to have a stagnant location in order to have intake training?
Yeah, I think it would be best for that community organization to have a brick and mortars facility.
Okay.
Something, not just as an example, the Boys and Girls Club. Everybody knows what the Boys and Girls Club is. They can go there if they wanted to make them play you. They
Right.
can go in there, and someone from the staff will be trained on how to do a intake.
And how long would that training be? Would it be multiple sessions, one session, one day?
I think intake training would probably be no more than a day. Just teaching someone at the staff about the basic information that needs to be gathered, identifying information and fact gathering enough to fill out a complaint and forward that on to our office.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else? Chief Turner.
Just one question. Would all of these classes be held at the Police Training Academy?
I'm not sure of
Or
that.
would there be other sites available?
They had to take the location that they were thinking would be the training academy or some facility on Mike Drive in that.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell-Good.
And then I had another follow-up question about the internship program. What exactly are the ages of the interns?
But it would be college-age students.
Okay. Okay. That's my question.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to move on to the expenditure request. First, let's discuss the 2019 NACO conference. Mr. Whedon, thank you for the information you shared with us and also the overview you provided here. I'd like to open the space up if there's any conversation or questions. Yeah, let's start there. Any discussion or questions there? Mr. Martinez.
Does the expenditure for the NACO conference include or budget in staff that you are planning to hire but have yet to hire?
Yes, this is the entire staff of 9. We have a staff of 9, so well as 10 with our executive assistant, but the investigative staff.
Ms. Rose.
I'd like to see somebody for the board lieutenant policy. And what would that cost be for another person?
Well, roughly, let me see, would probably be, what did I have here? Where's my, about $2,000 a person.
It's $2,000 a person.
Dr. Hildren.
And a related question is, could a board member participate paying their own way?
Oh, of course, yes. Board member could participate paying their own way. Just for, briefly, the hotel runs about $195 a night. The airfare was about $250. The registration fee was $529 per person, registration fee. So those are the 3 main areas that you'd have to be concerned with if you're going on your own.
Thank you. And I do not mean for my question to indicate that I'm not in support of Member Ross. I agree with her. I would be supportive of this board paying for one board membership, but I'm looking particularly at that track number 2, the community track, that if others were able to go, they would just make us stronger.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez.
Does NACO offer any scholarship opportunities?
They do. NACO does offer scholarship opportunities. I haven't read the requirements for that in a while, but they do offer scholarship opportunities, yes.
Thank you.
One last question. Do you know if they offer any continuing education units for this? Like POST or CLE or?
Well, typically they do. I know I usually am more concerned about the legal continuing education courses, and I know they offer those for some classes. So they may offer also for law enforcement as well.
Thank you. With that, I'll accept, is there a motion for the expenditure request to support the attendance to this year's national conference? Mr. Campbell. Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
I just, before we do the motion, I just need an overall of the numbers really fast. So how much, what's the number as far as the allocated line item? You mentioned it. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, we have we've got a couple of line items we probably can tap into. For instance, line item 502452, employee air travel. We have $15,000 allocated there. The employee out-of-town travel, line number 502451, we have $20,000 allocated. Tuition, 502882, we have $10,000 allocated. So we can, either one of those line items, I believe, would fit what we're trying to do with NACO.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
No problem.
Anyone else? Is there a motion? Mr. Martinez?
Would we have to move to indicate that this expenditure should also support at least one board member?
I think it would be, it would make sense so that we won't have to go back and simply retool this again. It would make sense to have a comprehensive motion here. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
So do you have to revise the number?
No. I think the numbers itself, I mean, they're going to fluctuate anyway, right? I mean, that airfare is likely change. We're just really looking at whether or not the board is approved to support the 9 members. I believe you said it was 9 that was the full COB staff and 1 member from the board, is what I hear. Mr. Holloway.
I agree that we support someone that is not a staff member. But what kind of budget are we working with, period?
So the numbers that Mr. Whedon just went over?
That's the budget?
Yes, that's directly from the budget. And there's at least, and I'm thinking in my mind, there's 2 other line items as well, not just for travel, but also for training. I know you mentioned tuition as well. So we are comfortably covered within the budget, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Wonderful question, important questions to ask.
So what do you require in terms of the budget motion right now?
So it sounds like from Mr. Martinez, and to answer his question too, that there's been a request for the board to support funding of the COB staff attending, the full COB staff attending the 2019 NACO conference. But this motion needs to also include, based on what I hear, 1 member of the board as well. So the full COB staff and 1 member of the Community Oversight Board. Did I see? I saw something in my peripheral. Mr. Cooper, apologies.
Question. So we're looking at the cost of this, attending this conference to be, I believe you said $19,300, and then adding in a staff member would add how much to that?
Approximately 2,000.
Okay, so $21,300. There's going to be a separate proposal for $5,000 for team building training. How much will that leave? We're early in our fiscal year. How much is that going to leave for these line item expenses? And I'm assuming this all comes out of travel, tuition, and dues. And what other expenditures do you anticipate we're going to have through the rest of this fiscal year that might be impacted by these expenditures?
The management training would most likely come out of line item 502229, which is management consulting services. We've allocated $25,000 for that. So if we were to approve that, $5,000 would come from there. Other training that I know of that we have...
Or other travel. I mean, obviously...
Well, no other travel. The main travel event that I anticipated that we most likely would be required to go to or need to go to would be NACO. So that's the only out-of-town travel that I think we would need. There's other events, for instance, or other training. I spoke with Northwestern University. They have a Center for Police or Center for Public Safety at Northwestern University. I've done some preliminary conversations with them about providing training for interview and interrogation training for our staff. They would come to Nashville to present that training, and they have 2 different methods that they could offer us if we wanted to have their staff come here to present that training. Of course, we'd have to pay for their expenses to come here. Generally, it's about 2 or at least 2 people from their staff that would come, but we'd have to pay their airfare and other necessary expenses to get here. But the course itself would come to about $400 per student for up to it will be a flat fee of $3,600 for up to 12 students for a 3-day training on interview and interrogation. If we did an open enrollment, which is where we would invite members from the community or other oversight organizations, for instance, from Memphis or Knoxville or Atlanta, to come up if they wanted to participate also. we could open it up to the public, and it would be $400 per person rather than a flat fee of $3,600 for 12 students. So there's a couple of different opportunities there with Northwestern University. Northwestern has a good program. Their public safety program is utilized by various oversight agencies across the country. As I said, the interview and interrogation program, the 3-day program, they're presenting that to the Chicago Oversight Agency. They also have a program that specifically deals with officer-involved shootings and critical incidents. I went to that program several years ago. I believe that's a 3-day program as well. They're revamping that program right now, so I wasn't able to get the numbers on how much that would be, but it will probably be in the same ballpark as the 3-day interview and interrogation program. So those are probably the only other 2 training programs that we're looking at in the near future.
And I'm assuming you're not looking to do all of those. I guess my question is, given that we have a limited amount in our budget for these particular line items, by opting into this early in our fiscal year, are there other things we need to have in mind that we might not be able to pay for over the succeeding months of our fiscal year? Just what trade-offs, if any, do we need to keep in mind on this?
I think with the training programs that I've just mentioned with Northwestern, NACO, and Dr. Cochran's program, I think those are the basic training programs that we would need immediately as a new organization. Other training programs would be along the lines of partnerships that we could work with other stakeholders, like we're working with the Metro Police Department as a stakeholder to present a program to us without cost. I've talked to the District Attorney's Office, did some preliminary conversations with them about presenting programs to us. Also, Dr. Lewis has put me in touch with the Medical Examiner's Office. We have an opportunity for them to partner with us, and they want to present a program to us as well. I forgot about that. They want to present a program to us about forensic investigation and how they make their determination, causes of death and things of that nature. So there's opportunities out there that don't require financial output. It's just a matter of building the relationship with these stakeholders and asking them to partner with us. And I find it you're usually pretty successful. People want to come in and provide that training, and generally it can be done without cost. So.
Yes. So, Mr. Whedon, I think in the interest of time and also to ensure that everyone is on the same page, here's what I'd like for us to do. For the next board meeting, if you could please come with and I say, a plan of sorts, right? So that we can see all of the training options that are on the table for both the COB staff, to include that of the board as well. It'd be great to also see if there is, if it's travel, for 2 people to come to Nashville versus $0 cost. And I think this would help also, and to Mr. Cooper's point of seeing holistically, if we're putting so much towards NACO, then, what are other training opportunities we're saying that are going to cost us nothing? And we're still going to be able to have the value of those trainings as well. I believe that as a board, we do better when we have things kind of in front of us, especially when it comes to numbers, and gives us a better belief that we are making a stronger decision. And thank you very much, because I think it's very clear how you got to these numbers. It's very obvious. But I think July would offer us an opportunity to have a broader conversation on trainings. And with that, Dr. Hildreth.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm listening intently to this conversation, and I think I'm having another question that I want to think out loud with a little bit. This is only the 3rd formal meeting that we have had with our executive director. And I'm wondering why we as a board are engaging in this conversation about whether or how the executive director is managing the budget that's been entrusted to him, okay? I am wondering, is it because we are looking at a particular expenditure area, training, which was so important to the framers of Amendment 1 that we're going forward? Is it because it is out-of-state travel? Is there a difference between an executive director making a decision, looking at his or her entire budget and saying, this is how I'm going to spend it for my staff, and then letting the board know, versus needing to come before this body when we decide to authorize funds on behalf of a board member, right? So I'm listening to the conversation and I have questions. I'm wondering, is there something that the Bylaws and Rules Committee has worked on that I have not paid close attention to, where some of these distinctions were made? Mr. Dickerson, I'm thinking about experience with other boards, and so I'm almost feeling like we are brand new, and we're very careful because when we do something for the first time, we can set precedent that it becomes hard to back out of. And I don't want us to start an unintentional or not having been mindful of the fact that we started a path towards micromanaging that we did not attend and cannot go back from before. However, as I said, if there's something about this transaction that does alarm or concern, then maybe that's something we need to put in the rules. So there's my wonderings out loud. I'm wondering, Mr. Dickerson, can you help me out? Am I just rambling?
No, I think that is a critical piece. This is traditionally something that executive directors, they will kind of decide this on their own and inform the board. And I think it's very good for the board to be able to hear what it is that's done. But the only thing that I've heard that would require a vote so far would be the board member attending. That's the piece that would require a vote. Certainly, this is the kind of things that we're talking about. As long as the budget is approved, and obviously that's contingent on council, then that is what authorizes the departments to spend the money.
Okay. Dr. Lewis.
I take it back, sorry. I'm good.
Dr. Hildreth, I appreciate you thinking out loud with us. I think it's important for us to consider. Thank you as well, Mr. Dickerson. I kind of lean to our Rules Committee here because I don't know that we've spoken to this issue. But I see Mr. Martinez, and he leads us here, so go right ahead.
You're right, our rules do not cover this, but as we were going through this conversation, I had the same thoughts I do work for a nonprofit, and we just went through the budget process. We just started a new fiscal year. So I tend to agree with Board Member Hildreth's thinking that possibly we shouldn't be micromanaging this type of expense, especially if we've already approved, as a board, approved this budget. Though I do have questions on when Metro's budget will be approved, when they approve our budget. And also, as we go on to discuss the rules next, if things like this need to be included in the rules, because our rules focus mostly on procedure of staff, not of this board. Right?
Thank you. So as a concluding thought on this, there are a couple of process triggers we could think about. I don't think it's unusual for an anticipated expenditure over a certain threshold amount to trigger a level of scrutiny. That level of scrutiny could be in the bylaws that when the executive director wants to entertain an expenditure over amount certain, that the executive director bring it to the executive committee for discussion, and executive committee can either approve it there or then bring it forward at the next as an agenda item the next time. Again, since we're in this first year, there are going to be so many instances of first impression, but that would be a way for this full body to have some assurance that there are eyes on, that to Member Cooper's point, we haven't spent our whole paycheck in the first month and then realize we don't have anything left. That conversation can be handled other places. So those are possible suggestions I throw out, and I am content to let the matter sit here at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. So it seems as if we'll hold for now. There's no need for a vote. Instead, we'll move this down to perhaps adding an amendment or something to the rules. Is that where we, am I taking that correctly? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Ross,
Motion
please.
for Ms. Ross's.
When does the early bird fee
Yeah.
for registration end?
Let me see here. I didn't write down when early bird ended, but I believe it's, I'd have to check into that.
Going to move the input of the board member, yes.
I know we are within the early bird period now. I think July, I think it's mid-July, because for some reason I was really trying to get this in before the next board meeting, but I don't know the exact date. I'll see if I can find it for you. I can try to find it.
He says, Mr. Martinez?
I was just going to mention that the scholarship application period is over, so we won't be able to do that, but also to say that we probably need a motion to approve a board member going still.
Agree.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell-Gooch?
I was going to so move. Motion that one board member be sent to the NACO training to represent this board.
You want a second?
Second.
Mr. Martinez, second. Any focused discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nay? Abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you. So with the essence of what we just discussed, I'm actually going to skip over the discussion around the community leadership training unless there is any just very intense and focused with a capital F discussion. If not, okay. I'm going to move down to the subcommittee updates. I'd like to begin with our bylaws and rules committee.
Okay, so we've met several times since we last met.
Mr. Holloway, could you give Mr. Martinez the mic?
Can you slide the mic down?
So we've created this draft that hopefully you all have had the time to look over very carefully. To give you some background of where the rules came from, we used a lot of rules documents from cities that have posted their own rules online. We used the actual charter provision, which is available on our website. We used the earlier proposed ordinance that didn't get passed. And for what we need to do now is...
Mr. Martinez, could you speak up a little bit?
So they can hear you over there.
What we need to do now is, as a board, come together and approve this draft and say, this draft is ready to go out to the community and go through that process that we had discussed at the last meeting. That process we haven't quite nailed down yet. What is the community engagement process going to look like, which I hope that we can nail down now. There are some rules in here that Mr. Sweeney highlighted as probably some things that will need discussion by the whole board. We can go over those, or I don't know if you have any specific questions about any specific things that you've seen in those boards, but again, nothing in here is going to be final. What we want today is an approval to go kind of shop this around to the community to get more input so that we can reach a more final draft to then present to the board for final approval.
Mr. Dickerson, I'd like to get your recommendation on how to move forward with this.
I think there are two votes that probably need to be taken. One is to actually approve the document to be sent to the community, and the second is to establish what exactly that process is to go to the community. In fact, I think there's a lot of talk about it at the last meeting, but I'm not sure that there was ever a vote on what that process was.
Okay.
And it may be that the board wants to go through the sections like we did the bylaws. It may be that you all feel that you've read enough and you don't want to necessarily go through it. That's up to you.
Okay. Thank you. I mean, I am open to suggestions here. Ms. Ross.
clarify timelines because that's something that we wanted to bring back to the board that was not clarified.
Correct. One of the things we've included in here for the board's review is a complaint timeline, a draft of what we propose to be a complaint timeline. It's the last page. It's marked Exhibit C. We had a lot of debate about that. There's concerns about accountability, but there's also concerns about being thorough and being able to actually go through in a whole investigation. I think that's something that we do need to discuss, as Ms. Ross said. But again, nothing final is going to be approved here tonight. This is what we need today is an approval to shop this to the community so that we can actually get input then too on something like the timeline.
One moment, Mr. Dickerson.
And I'll also point out that what Exhibit C is what we're talking about. This isn't actually going to be part of the rules, but this is a nice summary for everybody to be able to see what the rules produce as far as the timeline.
So cool.
Nice.
Mr. Campbell Gooch.
And in the kind of the discussion that Ms. Marsh kind of led in the meeting was that do we want to have these timelines in the standard operating procedures versus do we want to set these timelines in order to hold the ED accountable, kind of like what Dr. Hildreth was kind of pointing to. Those were just the dynamics that I think we wanted to let the board kind of weigh in on.
So first things first, it sounds like we can at least address the first motion. Mr. Dickerson said, right, one of two is to get the board's okay here, that this be shopped around. Am I right about that? I want to make sure I understand. Mr. Martinez, do you agree?
Yes.
Okay, so is there a motion there? Does anyone have a motion? Does anyone want to make a motion? Okay.
Second.
And could we, and for the purpose of notes here, I want to be thoughtful of, let us know ever if we need to repeat anything here. Okay. So it was moved by Mr. Cooper. Thank you. Dr. Lewis, second. Any focused discussion?
I do have one question about that. Once this motion is off, would we then have a discussion on what we want that process to look like?
Exactly.
Okay, that's
Absolutely. Any additional focused discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nay? Abstentions, the motion carries. Thank you very much. And so now let's discuss, now that we've established that we will share this out to the community, let's discuss what that looks like, right? And so are there, Mr. Campbell-Gooch, you raised it here, but are there thoughts about that?
I think, if I remember correctly, and this is just refreshing my mind and also making sure we gauge what the discussion is. Before, previously, we had talked about getting one representative from the nominating body, and then also including one representative of MMPD and hopefully the chief. Those were kind of like the parameters that we kind of talked about before. Okay.
It is, and I remember there was an extensive discussion about that, at least I saw for myself. I want to be really clear here. So essentially what we need to determine is what is like, base one, where we're going first with this, and who is included. Step two, and did the committee have suggestions on this, or are we starting with a blank canvas here? Mr. Martinez.
Yeah, so what we envisioned with the rules is that we would engage the community in writing them so that the community's voice is heard in this board and what the board is doing. So at the last board, during our subcommittee meetings, we did not discuss what the community engagement process was going to be. We were very busy discussing the substance of this. But during our last full board meeting, there were some ideas thrown out there. It was engaging different community organizations, different community leaders who had also applied to be on the board. So I think that's where the discussion needs to be at, is with these ideas of how each of us is going to be participating in that process and taking a lead in that process.
Okay. Mr. Campbell.
I was going to say, I think we can go about it several different ways. I know the executive director, Mr. Wheaton, has been in contact with some organizations on the ground. I also know that several organizations are represented at this round table right here. So we can go about it, I think, several different ways. We can use the email list of the people who also applied, or we can reach out or have the executive director reach out to those organizations. I don't want to add too much more to your plate. I know you have a lot going on. So I think it's several different ways we can be creative about including people on the ground.
There's a timeline here. We're saying we want this engagement to take place before the next board meeting, right? Am I correct about that?
Hopefully we can put a committee together to do this process. Because I still think we need to go back to the community organizations that nominated persons. Because some of those persons are still interested in being on the subcommittee. So we can do a subcommittee to work through this.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. Mr. Campbell.
And to build on Ms. Ross, and I also think those community members are still excited. And so I don't think it would take very long to organize and pull them together.
So the board saying that we trust that we can empower maybe it's one or two members of the board to lead this charge, or do we keep this within the Rules Committee? I just want to make sure I'm understanding the essence of what's being shared here.
Somebody on Rules Committee needs to be part of that.
Yeah, I think if we incorporate the Rules Committee and have them facilitate the discussion, I think we can get community input and also have a focused discussion on the MOU.
Got it. Okay. So this would be, okay, this would include both components of it. Yeah, I got it.
I think ideally, Ms. Ross.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that the Rules Committee convene community piece.
The community, thank you.
Engagement.
The community engagement component.
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry, I just didn't hear.
Could you repeat the motion?
That the Rules Committee take the lead role on the community engagement.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Ross. 1 second.
Second.
Dr. Hildreth seconds. Any focused discussion? Dr. Hildreth?
Being mindful of realities, this is the end of June. Next month is July, and it becomes difficult to convene. Could there be, this doesn't need to be in the motion, but could there just be a contemplation of maybe this will take 60 days to accomplish, that we make the August meeting as a focus rather than try to do it by July? I'm just concerned that many of the folks that we need to contact are just not going to be available at this time of year.
I think that makes sense, so long as the subcommittee is prepared to at least give an update on the progress thus far, which I think they certainly would be willing to do. Mr. Martinez.
I'm thinking about our proposed MOU, or the draft we have currently, and how we are going to be engaging the community simultaneously on that as well. Yeah, so...
Your concern is what, though?
Is that taking a back seat, or...
Do the Rules Committee work that out?
We have to present an MOU to the police department for the staff to get in that working relationship. So it's a good question.
So is the MOU, do we present that to the police first or the community first?
The board hasn't seen it yet.
Right, but
So it sounds as if we need to address that, and we'll certainly take a motion for that, one. And then two, we can decide how we want to prioritize. Is that fine? I understand the question. I understand it naturally. It follows based on what we're talking about here. Let's put, I I want to land on this, though, without even considering what comes next, to say that we've agreed, one, to share this out to the community. We've also agreed as a board that the Rules Committee will lead on how the community engagement takes place.
That's the motion.
That's the motion.
Yeah, that's the motion on the floor.
Here in front of us, apologies. Yeah, so that's the discussion here. Is there any additional focused discussion on this? Mr. Cooper.
How does this motion about increased community engagement, I guess, interact with the motion that we approved at the last meeting to form a community task force? Are we asking the committee to put that task force together? Is this something separate from the task force? And if it is, how are we going about putting together the task force? That is a motion we adopted at the last meeting.
I think, can you read out the motion that was?
The motion from our last meeting?
Yeah.
Member Hildreth moved to form a community task force to review and comment on the memorandum of understanding and rules prepared by the Rules and Procedure Committee prior to presentation of the memorandum to the Metro Police Department, to invite the police chief or his designee to represent the department on the task force, for the task force to begin work after the committee presents drafts of the memorandum and rules to the board for review and prior approval.
Okay. So with this motion, then, the way I see it, you would be directing the Rules and Bylaws Committee to then put this task force together. Yes.
Any other questions? Okay. Mr. Campbell.
I was going to say the same thing.
Okay.
I think our visions of what happens next are the
Yeah.
Gotcha. Any additional focused discussion here? No?
So just so we're clear, the motion is that the Rules Committee will set up the community task force, correct? Okay.
That's correct. That, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nay? Abstentions? The motion passes. Thank you very much. The MOU task force, let's stay in line here. The MOU task force, Mr. Martinez, you want to begin with that, and then we can.
Sure. So, I mean, if you've had the opportunity to look at the MOU, it's still something that we're working on. Is it here? Did he include it?
Yes, it's the one with the lots of colors.
I don't think it was included in the the memo that Mr. Sweeney composed, because it's still something that we're going over. Yeah.
Mr. Martinez?
Yeah.
Can you please speak up a little
Sure.
bit so they can hear you over there? The outside voice.
Yes, I mean, so, sorry, this wasn't part of the memo that Mr. Sweeney composed. As far as what the MOU task force has been doing, which should be changed, I don't think there is an MOU task force. It's just the Bylaws and Rules Committee who have been working on this MOU, along with Mr. Whedon and now our new legal counsel, Mr. Hinckley, I think. This is something, again, that's going to have to go through the same process as the rules and the bylaws that we've been working with, and something that's going to need to shop to the community, which is what my question was from earlier, is if this is something that we should be doing simultaneously, or is this something that's going to be taking a back seat? Because to me, this is something that's very important, that gets to I mean, we need to have this agreement firm just as much as we need to have the rules firm, and there's no reason that we should be waiting to do this later and do the rules first. I think maybe this is something that we should be doing at the same time. And I'm not sure at what point we need to be engaging the police department And this, if it's sooner rather than later, if it's the community first and the police department next.
So your point is that it sounds like two things here. One, you're asking, should we be running this parallel in time, right? So they are not running one after the other, but rather at the same time that we're focused on engaging the community around the rules and the bylaws, we're also engaging them on the MOU components. And then the second part of this is when and, when do we engage the police, right? Do we invite them to engage at the same time that the community members are engaging, or is that first the community members, then the police, or vice versa? Am I right about that? Okay.
That's correct.
Both great points that I think that we should land on. Dr. Lewis?
Yeah, we passed a motion last time that we were going to take it to the community before we took it to Metro PD.
For Metro PD.
For the MOU. My question is, and I'm on the committee and I don't remember, are we ready to present the MOU to the board? The board can vote on if we are ready to present that to the community along with the rules.
I think we are, because we've been through this whole draft. And Mr. Whedon, I chime in here if you think otherwise, but we finished reviewing the proposed MOU.
Yeah, I think we did finish reviewing this. So I think we maybe, if everyone's read it, had a chance to read it, I don't know if anyone has any comments on it, but I think it is in a position to be presented at this point.
Yeah. The issue is, are we going to have to go through it line by line like we did the bylaws as a whole board?
Can you say that one more time, Mr. McKee?
The issue is if we're going to have to go through it line by line as an entire board as we did the bylaws a few meetings ago.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Mr. Dickerson?
I want to point out also that much like the rules, you'll have another shot at this.
Right.
So this is, you don't necessarily have to go through line by line like the bylaws because you were voting on that. You weren't taking input from other people. So this is a preliminary document. It's understood that it will come back to you after it's been to the community.
That's very good point. I think naturally we all feel uneasy, like, well, if I haven't read every word and every comma, sending it out. But the idea is, of course, that it will come back to the board, right? And we will again have time to review, deliberate as such. So with that in mind, one, thank you, Dr. Lewis, for reminding us. You're absolutely correct. We did agree that we would take it to the community and then engage Metro Police. And so that has been settled, and we don't need to revisit that or take a vote to that at all. Really what's at hand here is the decision that this is ready to now be shared out. And so is there a vote, or is there a motion, rather, to extend the preliminary document to the community? Mr. Cooper.
I was hoping I could ask a question
Please,
about one of the provisions before getting to that. And Mr. Martinez, or members of the committee, just looking at Section 3 on jurisdiction, I was wondering if you could explain a little bit about what distinction we're trying to make here. The section starts off seeming to restrict its scope to matters within the jurisdiction of the COB under the Metro Charter, then says that the OPA will review complaints against department employees initiated by a member of the department, except matters that relate to misconduct against members of the public, although that would seem to be what we're talking about with this section anyway, since it's restricted to matters under the Metro Charter Amendment. And then I guess I might also argue that, in a sense, any offense by an employee of the police department would be, in some sense, misconduct against the public. So I assume we're being more narrow than that. And then that the COB shall review complaints against employees initiated by the public and matters initiated by employees that relate to misconduct against members of the public. So I guess, what are we saying falls within our jurisdiction, and what are we saying falls within OPA's jurisdiction?
From my understanding, we would take on cases that arise from an MNPD employee against a member of the public, and a case arising from a complaint from an MNPD employee against another MNPD employee against a member of the public.
It would go to OPA.
Sorry?
It would go to OPA.
An internal complaint. But if another, say, police officer complains about a police officer committing some type of misconduct against a member of the public, that would still fall under our jurisdiction. I know it's confusing.
It might be helpful to diagram this sentence.
It sort of has been hyper wordsmithed by multiple different people at this point, and it's lost some of its meaning. But the intent was that OPA would handle complaints that are truly internal to Metro PD. So if someone's embezzling, that would go to OPA. But if one officer witnesses another officer taking an offensive action against a member of the public, that would come to the Community Oversight Board, as would any complaints that were generated by the public. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that would come to the COB exclusively, or so that only COB would investigate it and not OPA?
That's correct.
Correct. Man of the hour.
Before we get to the meat of this conversation, because I think this is where the most meat is, and I need the board to trust me. I need a 5-minute break. Just a 5-minute, okay? So I motion that we take a 5-minute break.
But, thank you, Mr. Cambaguchi. Before we do that, let me just say something. I just need to say two things. One, let's not get in the weeds of a discussion that we're going to have to revisit.
Right.
Even if the questions are purposeful, credible, which all of them are here, there is time and opportunity for ensuring that the spirit and purpose of this is met with the language, right? So no in the weeds, not tonight, right? It's not necessary. We're going to have to retool it anyway. Secondly, and I'm coming outside of this subject to talk about another. Number 10 talks about the CB Executive Board elections. The only thing we need to say on this is this. Pursuant to what we agreed to, our bylaws, right, we are coming up against the need to vote on our executive board members, and I want to talk about that in the month of July so that everyone can take the next month to decide how and if they want to be engaged in these roles. I think we thoughtfully agreed on 6 months because we wanted to ensure that others had the opportunity, and I just think that's really important that we talk about that, right? We've all been invaluable and indispensable here. With that, there's been a motion for 5-minute break here. Is anyone second?
Second.
Cooper seconds. Any focused discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Sound like everybody. Nay. Abstention, 5 minutes. Thank you, everyone.
Mr. Dickinson, if you could just kind of...
Yeah, I was saying that if there are any changes that people wanted to make to the MOU, then a motion could be for the Rules Committee to make changes consistent with what's being discussed here today, and then Rules can send it to the community. And that way they can incorporate the concerns Mr. Cooper had or any other concerns that are raised here.
Mr. Swain.
I apologize for being late and for missing part of the conversation about this, but I have been filled in on some that took place before. My sense from the drafting of the MOU is that we're not in a position to present it to the community at this stage because the committee hasn't met even on this most current draft. That was a redraft from our last meeting. And I think we're at least 1 or 2 meetings away from having a draft that's at the same level as the rules that we presented to you today. And so I don't want to box up the process of what's taken place before I got here. But if I can provide that input, I think the rules are very much ready to go to the community, but I think the MOU would probably be better to present at a later time after the more fully developed.
Would the MOU be, do you think the MOU could be ready by August?
Yeah, I think so. You mean ready for presentation to the community?
To the community, yes.
Yes, I think so.
Just as a point of order, is the board okay with the Rules Committee presenting it to the community prior to presenting it to the board as a whole? Or do you want the Rules Committee to wait, come to the August board meeting, present the MOU then?
Mr. Sweeney, then Ms. Ross?
I would suggest that we follow the same procedure that we did with the rules, and that we present it to the board first. And that if the board looks at it and says, yes, this is generally what we think it should look like, subject to whatever change based upon input from the community, then we can do that rather than going to the community before the board has given a tentative okay or blessing to it.
Mr. Cooper, then Mr. Holloway.
Just to Dr. Lewis's question, the motion that was adopted at our last meeting provided that the memorandum and rules would be presented to the board for review and prior approval before being circulated to the community. So I think if we were to change that procedure, we would need a new motion.
I'm fine with that. I was just seeking clarity.
Mr. Holloway.
Why did it's coming out with you? That is correct. Because bringing in the community, it's just like tearing the house down and trying to build it all over again. So I think we're making a good start right now. So make sure we get everything in place the way we see fit, and then take it to the community.
Dr. Hilda.
Thank you. I have a process idea I'd like to float subject to council's approval of this. One of the things that really helped us polish the rules to a high gloss is we had a couple of meetings where we went line by line through everything. And that was before we had an executive director, so we didn't have a hub where we could each communicate with each other except for in a meeting. Now that we do, would it work to have the best draft that the committee comes up with emailed to the board members? If the board members have anything that we want to discuss amongst ourselves, we send that back with a highlight. And so at the next meeting, there's a document with highlights on it, knowing that we picked up everybody's conversation point. What that would do would keep us from going over something that there's some consensus of this isn't a problem. And then perhaps if we move through just the highlighted points on the draft, we could get through it in a line-by-line fashion. Is that
No problem.
work? Okay. Does that have to be a motion? Is that just a suggestion?
I don't think it has to be.
Okay. So I would like to suggest that.
Okay.
I think that's great.
Mr. Sweeney.
I think it's a great idea.
Okay. Ms. Lewis, did you have anything?
I definitely think that's a great idea, and I also think that we should continuously I think we should treat the MOU kind of like the rules with the polishing process. Mr. Dickinson, do we still need a motion on empowering the bylaws and rules committee, or?
I think you're set, actually, since we're not doing anything on the MOU yet. I mean, you can make a motion to defer it, or you can just not take a motion and they can put it on the next agenda.
Okay. Mr. Martinez?
I think there was a motion on the table because we were in discussion when we went into a break. So I think that motion needs to be pushed back.
What was mentioned?
I don't know who.
I think we're just in a discussion. I don't think a motion had been made. I usually keep notes on whenever there are motions. I think we're clean.
Okay. Okay. Any discussion on the MOU, the draft that is in front of us right now? Yes, Mr.
Just as a point, on the agenda, 9B says MOU task force, but since that doesn't exactly exist, the MOU just comes under bylaws and rules. You can, I mean, just so we're all on the same page.
Okay.
The document committee. I don't want to rename it again, but.
Mr. Swing?
I think I may be going back to something that has already been addressed, and again, I apologize if I am.
Perfectly fine.
But I'd ask for some clarification as far as the task force input on the rules. My understanding, and I don't know that this has been clearly stated, is what is the function of a community input? And I think from what we've done before and how we've gone through it, that the purpose of community input is to help us to make sure that we've gotten the rules right. So that we're not going to anyone to ask them to draft new rules. We're not going to anyone to ask them to veto any particular rule that we have. But the function of adopting rules is the function of the board. And the committee is set up, and through the task force will continue to act to facilitate that process. And so that when we speak with those who are going to provide us with input, we explain what the process is and what we're looking for and why we have requested input, so that there's no misunderstanding as to the role and function that we're asking the representatives to perform. That's one. And number two is that in this process, I understand community input means both public communities and police community, or however you want to define that. And the question where there's approval for us to set up a task force, I don't know one way or the other, and I guess the committee will decide when it meets, as to whether that's one task force or whether that might be multiple task forces. That maybe the public community input is different from the police community input, and maybe the way to get the most constructive information would be not getting, 9 representatives together of all of those groups, but maybe multiple meetings of multiple groups. I'm just asking and seeing if the board considers the committee to have the authority to decide how it's going to go about the process of getting input.
Mr. Holloway, then, if that's it.
I don't think meeting with the community is going to be the situation to help us make it right. It's basically just create a dialogue so we can be able to communicate, so we can understand each other. That's my point.
That's all. Professor.
Thank you. I had 2 comments responding to Member Sweeney. I think I agree. I think that this is more akin to the public comment opportunity in proposed rulemaking and other situations, so that we do explain that this board is the deliberative body, but we are wanting to hear and receive comments. The second idea, and going back to thinking from our last meeting, that when we reach out to all of the other organizations that were nominating organizations, I am wondering and hoping if our committee can be flexible enough to make that conversation available in whatever way makes sense. So, for example, there may be community organization X that has a monthly meeting, and the way they would like to handle it is to have a member from the board come presented and read and answer any questions such as that individual may be able to, and that could be any one of us. There may be another way in which it was decided best that 2 or 3 organizations could come together, and at a particular community center that's metro, you would come in and have them, that there's flexibility there. So I'm wondering if that would encompass the idea about one versus many.
Yeah. And I do think, like, big picture, I do think we want to involve as many community members as possible in this process. And I think we need to constantly be empowering community members. But as far as getting this settled, I do think having a smaller body at first, just to see how it works, and then we can expand it out. Mr. Whedon, is there anything you would like to say about the MOU as far as the draft as it is right now?
Well, no, just that I agree that we need community input, so I would just recommend that we do that, find a way to do it. So that's the only suggestion I would add, or comment I would add.
Okay. Is there any more folks? Yes, Mr. Swain.
Can I just ask one other question about the rules? Since we're going to wait at least until August, until we have final rules adopted, and since we're trying to figure out what's the best way to handle these, and that's one of the reasons why we're engaging in dialogue with the community, I would suggest that we consider authorizing the Mr. Whedon and his staff to operate tentatively under these proposed rules. I understand they've already received a couple complaints, and there's no established process for looking at them. And as we went through the rules and all like that, we had some questions such as, do the time periods make sense? And as we give them kind of a test run, we'll learn more from them. And since we're tentatively going to be making further changes to the rules anyway based upon community input, that, if it's feasible, and I don't know if it is feasible, from a legal standpoint, that we authorize Mr. Whedon and his staff to operate under these tentative rules pending our meeting in August.
Ms. Dixon.
Can I suggest that it might be, because I'm not exactly sure what that motion would look like, it might be one of a directive from the board for him to operate as though he's under the rules. And then it's not, for instance, I can tell you right now, he's already going to have some issues with the timeline because he's negotiating with me, representing another Metro department, about some things that are going to take some time and probably delay one investigation.
Okay.
But I don't think you need to take a vote on it, but if he can, if it's the board's wish that he act under the timeline or act under the rules so that it's kind of a test run, a dry run, and I don't think that requires it. And also, you guys remember that time that I said that there wasn't a pending motion before the break? It was in fact incorrect. Well, it turns out that Ms. Pearson, who takes much better notes than I do, said that there was actually a motion. So let me first apologize to Mr. Martinez. And second, someone made a motion to extend the MOU to the community. Would anyone take ownership of that? Do we have a listing of who that was, Ms. Pearson?
The last one I had was Dr. Lewis.
Oh, well, I withdraw that motion.
The motion to extend a preliminary MOU to the community.
I withdraw the motion. I didn't even remember I made it.
Yes.
Mr. Dickerson, I guess responding to your point, which I think is well taken, would a motion be appropriate that the staff of the board use the draft rules as guidance in conducting investigations pending the adoption of formal rules?
I think that makes sense.
I so move.
Focus discussion? Okay. Ayes? Aye. Any nays? Abstentions? I'll move. And which one? 10. Okay. And I think we should defer 10 to the next one, saying that Chair had to step out for a second.
She got it. She mentioned that there was going to be a vote in July on the next executive board because you have the current 6 months limit. So I think we got that with that.
Yep.
Diverted.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. I do want to take. I do think when we had the discussion about the expenditures, I do think we ought to seriously consider empowering Mr. Whedon here when it comes to the budget and line items. I do think that there needs to be more discussion around maybe him bringing it back to us when he exceeds a limit. I don't know if we need to make that decision today, but I do think we need to seriously discuss that. Mr. Martinez.
Given that we discussed possibly amending the bylaws to trigger such a rule,
yes.
I wanted to bring Mr. Sweeney up to
please do.
Date on what we discussed earlier. Mr. Whedon had proposed having us vote on an expenditure of $19,000 for the entire staff to go to the NACL conference. And in the budget that we had originally approved, there was a $20,000 line item for such an expense. So Board Member Hildreth brought up a very good point that as Executive Director, he can manage the budget however he wants as we approved it. But we had discussed then possibly amending the bylaws to include a rule saying that if such an expense is triggered above a certain amount, that he would have to seek board approval.
Okay.
That's where we are right now.
One possible suggestion to maybe amend that concept is to have the executive director have to come to the board if he seeks to exceed what the budget is. So it's not a certain amount, because like the rent for Washington Square will be like $100,000 or whatever it is. So instead of saying, well, it's $25,000 or more, you say as soon as he wishes to go above the given expenditure budget for a particular line item, that he has to seek approval. And also, I'll point out that this particular kind of discussion wasn't on the agenda, so it might make sense for it to be on next month's agenda for a vote.
Yep.
And that way everybody can take time to consider.
Do we have to make a motion to table the motion?
I think it just
There's
runs
no
under new
motion.
business.
Yep.
So it'll automatically get bumped up to old business in the next agenda.
So with that being said, any new business? Yes, sir.
I just want to say that this will be my last meeting, and it's been a pleasure working with all of you. I know that there definitely have been several committee and individual board meetings where there's been a ton of discussion, and this has been, for lawyers, this is really fun stuff to do. So I was really excited to get this assignment, and I've worked really closely with Todd so far, and I'm literally 2 floors up, and so I've told him that my door is open, and the same thing for William. But I have yet to be as close to any board or commission as I am to you all. Call it inversion. But I just wanted to say thank you for everybody for working with me on this. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that being said, do I have any motions? Any more new business? Okay. I'll take a motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Any focus discussion? Any ayes? Ayes. All right. See y'all soon.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.